Hey everybody, welcome to one more round. Today I'm very excited, and this is probably, I was just telling Brooke, I've done 100 of these. This is actually episode number 100, and I've never been nervous actually. Today I'm a little nervous, and you'll probably see a little bit why, but this is very special because as many of you have been following my story know that I had gone through some serious health issues and ended up getting a heart transplant a few years back. Well, this is the mother of the donor. And we had a chance to spend some time together several months ago. I think it was in January, and it was one of the really greatest conversations. And I'm like, I'd love to have her on so that we can share a little bit about her son and the experience, and then anybody who's been through the transplant side or the donor side, I'm sure can relate to this story. So, thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I guess we'll just start with this. I mean, you and I, when we first met, and we were talking about Abraham and just kind of getting to know each other, I had no idea that you had lived in this area for as long as you had, and then you told me where you went to church, which was Gospel Echoes.
Yes.
Now, Gospel Echoes is literally became Word of Grace. That's where I started going to church. So there was about, you said, I think, the first 26 years of your life?
Yes.
So when I started going there was about a 4-year overlap. We were going to the same place at the same time, and then your parents have owned a business that is literally right on the street on the way there that I've driven by hundreds of times and had no idea. So all of the things that we had kind of put together that were just like, wow, you couldn't even write this type of thing. It's very interesting. But tell me a little bit about, number one, your story, Abraham, and then what was it like having to go through all of this?
So Abraham is my youngest of three. He was 16 years old when he was boxing and had his accident. Boy, growing up, he was such an amazing kid. Perfect baby. Never had any issues with them, never cried, really. Just a happy, happy kid. And, things were going really well. He was a sophomore in high school. He loved boxing. That was his absolute life, his passion, his everything. And I supported him in everything that he would do. And he would always ask me, do you really think I could do this? Do you really think I could do this? He wanted to be a DJ. He wanted to be a boxer, a professional boxer. And then he said he wanted to be a jack of all trades. He wanted to do basketball. He wanted to do football. He tried out for and made the Mesa High football team, but it interfered with his boxing schedule. So that's what he chose, was boxing, because that was his actual passion. And
What was his inspiration in getting into boxing?
Mike Tyson.
Mike Tyson, right?
I mean, my dad, we were staying with my dad and my mom for a while, and my dad I think it was a time when there was a lot of fights happening. And so my dad would be watching the fight, and, Abraham was not into anything at that point. He was just kind of like, meh. But he was starting junior high the following year, and he was a little overweight, and he was like, I can't go to junior high and be chubby. I gotta do something. And so he started to get some interest in boxing and stuff. And then it was the summer between 8th and 9th grade, where he was starting high school, that he was like, okay, now I've really got to put my efforts to this. And we had a family friend who owns a boxing gym, which is the Broadway Boxing Club. And I contacted him, and I was like, hey, my son really is interested in, training and stuff. He wants to start for weight loss and stuff. So they got him in, and it was like love at first fight. Got in there and punching the punching bag, and it was more of a community, a family in there too. It wasn't just a place where he would go by himself. And so yeah, that's how it all started. And we went in there, and next thing you know, it's pairs of boxing gloves being bought, and shoes and wraps and more gloves because he would break them, and shoes and wraps, and it was his home away from home.
Yeah.
He was there every day. I say we, but he was there every day. And it was down the street from my work. So it was after school, I'd go pick him up, take him, drop him off there, go back to work. He'd get a ride there to my work, or I would come pick him up. But just every single day, even when he was sick, he would try to go. And I'm like, you can't, nobody wants you there when you're sick. But he would go no matter what.
Yeah, and he had quite the transformation, right? I mean, he lost weight. Didn't he start like cooking and really changing everything?
Yeah, he lost a lot of weight, and it almost seemed as though because it happened at the same time that he was having a growth spurt. So, he was getting very tall, and thinning out, and he learned how to cook chicken because he didn't want to rely on anybody. So he was eating the same chicken, rice, and broccoli almost every day. Yeah. But, he did it religiously. He was so good about it. He only had one day that he would splurge on his food, and that's when he would want me to make Sunday morning breakfast.
Yeah.
And then he wanted it all. He wanted the eggs and the hash browns and everything.
That's amazing. Now, you had told me a story about you guys were in a car and he was having a conversation with you and he had asked you some things. You want to tell that? And I don't want to go into anything you don't want to talk about. But I think it's really cool to hear how his mindset was, and that he was, he was a faithful kid, right?
Yeah. So we had many conversations. He. Sorry.
No.
My brain's just. He would always ask me like, what. Well, let me ask you this. Which conversation are you talking about?
This is one where
I want to make sure
he had looked at you and said, Mom, I want to make sure I'm right with God. I believe is what you told me.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, that's what I thought. There's so many conversations we've had
you guys
about.
Were very close, yeah. So.
Yeah, he and I are best friends, like hands down. So sometimes being a teenage boy, words that would come out of his mouth sometimes weren't always, the nicest. Not necessarily to me, but just swearing and stuff. And I can remember seeing like a shift in him in the days, even like the week or so before the accident happened. And I had said something, I was like, oh, you're acting different. And he's like, no, I'm fine. And, he's like, Mom, I just want to make sure I'm right with God in how I'm living my life. I need to make some serious changes. And I was like, okay, and of course I'm going to support anything, especially positive things. And I was like, anything in particular? He's like, well, just the way I talk and the way I sometimes get mad. And I just want to make sure that, I get into heaven. And I was like, well, buddy, of course you're going to get into heaven. You're an amazing kid. I'm like, despite, those everyday things that we all do, he was so kind and so generous and so loving. Never in my life have I seen or heard a kid as little as 3 for him and as old as 16 for him care more about other people. When he would see homeless people and stuff, he would be inclined to give his money that he's earned. He would have $3 in his pocket, and going into Circle K, he's like, well, I don't need anything, I'm gonna give this to this person. And I can remember there's a few times I was like, you don't want to do that, son. That's you worked for that, and you don't know what they want it for. And he's like, that's okay, Mom. And I'm like, okay. He's definitely somebody I could follow their example. but in the week or so prior to the accident, there were a lot of shifts in his behavior. He would stand and hug me longer. Um, he would look at me longer and tell me things like, you're really beautiful, Mom. You're a really good person. And um, the same with his sisters. He would sit and have conversations with his sisters like, you need to fix these things in your life, and you need to do these things, and you need to think more about this or that. And it was, now looking back, it was almost like he was preparing for what was to come, as if he knew, but that's hard to think about. So
Yeah. Wow. Well, I know when you told me that story, I was like, it's amazing he was thinking about those things, almost kind of like I don't, not that he knew something bad was going to happen, but like he knew that he was preparing himself for just what he wanted to be. And then you showed me a letter, which won't go into that, but this letter that he wrote to himself, which was just beautiful, and I appreciate you sharing that with me. But so to the day, like what happened?
So it was the day, so September 28th of 23, and he was supposed to be sparring that day, and my dad wanted to go with him because he'd never seen him fight yet. And so I usually would get him a Uber to my work or to the boxing gym, and then one of us would take him from there because it was at a away gym. His coach, his regular coach was out of town, so the backup coach was just going to meet him there. And so my dad's like, yeah, I'll take him. And then when the time came, my son called me after school and was like, hey, I need a ride. So I was like, okay, I'll get you an Uber. And things kept happening that were stopping him from getting in that Uber. Like the first one, he couldn't find his mouth guard. And then he missed the car and it left. And then I ordered another one and it said it was delayed. But then all of a sudden things fell back into place and Uber got there for him. And he got to my work and he walked in the front door, and I had already gone outside to start the car and get the air running or whatever. And my mom said he just walked in and, said hi, gave everybody hugs, and was like, okay, I'm going to go. And I skipped over the part where my dad had decided he couldn't go. And I had asked my daughter, can you take him? And she's like, I don't really feel like driving. And so I was like, okay, I'll take him. It was exciting. Okay, I'm going to see him. I don't care if I have to leave work. I'm going. I'm going to be with my boy. And so now back to where I'm sitting out in the car, and he gets out there, he gets in the car, and, he was quiet, didn't want to listen to music or anything. He just wanted to kind of talk, and nothing in particular, just kind of talking about his career, school. He was telling me he didn't want to go to school anymore. He wanted to focus on just boxing. And I was like, well, you got just a couple years left. Let's get through school. And, he's like, well, you can homeschool me. And I'm like, well, it'll be like you dropping out because I don't know that I can do that. So it was kind of a quiet ride there, just little chatting here and there. And he was telling me about music. He liked to make beats on his computer program. And he's like, oh, yeah, I got to show you these, new songs I made. And he played a song on the radio for me. But we just kind of drove there. Yeah. And so we get there and we go in, and he wanted me to sit with him while he was warming up. So we went and sat outside, and I was watching him do his jumping jacks and his jump rope and the punching bag and everything. And, I was talking to him and telling him how much I've seen him grow and how amazing I think he is and everything. And it was we had a real heart-to-heart talk in there. And then it was time to start. So we went and we were sitting on the ring side, and he was wrapping his hands and getting his gloves on and his headgear and his other paddings and stuff. And I was sitting on this side of him, he was sitting here, and we're sitting on the edge of the ring, and he looked over at me and he's like, do you really think I could make it as a fighter? And I was like, of course you can. You could do anything you put your mind to. And I was like, you're going to be the best. And I was like, that's why they call you champ. And he was like, yeah, you know, I'm the champ. And then he said something that he was going to get champ tattooed on his neck.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah. I said, I'll get it too. We'll both get it. I'll get champ in Old English letters right here on my neck. And he goes, you would do that for me? I was like, I'd do anything for you. And then he's like, thanks, Ma. I love you. And I was like, I love you too. You're the best son I could ever have asked for. And then he gave me a hug, and he got in the ring, and the spar started. And, you know, he was doing well, but the coach must have seemed that something was off. So between the first and second round, he went over, and my son was like, no. And, you know, I was like, what's going on? And I kind of wasn't included in the conversation, but I was trying to hear what they were talking about. And then Abraham was like, no, I'm fine. I got this. And went back in, and it wasn't even maybe, I don't know, 30 seconds or so into it, he got a real hard blow to the head. And he just kind of, it was more than just being stunned. And the coach was like, you know, hey. And then Abraham was like, I can't hear out of my right ear. And so the coach was like, okay, come off. And I was recording it all at this point. And so when that happened, I kind of put my phone down, and I was like, what's going on? And Abraham almost, it's like he couldn't turn his head to look at me. And it was just, he said that he couldn't hear out of his right ear. They thought maybe his eardrum got blown. And so I was already gathering his stuff. I was going to take him to the ER because at that point, that's all we thought it was, because he was still talking. And then his color started fading, and he started, you know, his demeanor was changing a little bit. He's like gnawing on his mouth guard. And he, at this point, they're already on the phone with 911 because it was rapidly changing. And he was like, man, something's not right. And then he looked down, and he was like, man, I'm scared, and kind of shook his head. And I was like, you don't have to be scared, buddy. I'm right here. You're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. We're getting an ambulance for you. And all the coaches that were there kind of were swarming around him, and I was kind of getting pushed back a little bit further. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe they know what they're doing. So I kind of stood by his feet, and they went to sit him down. And when they sat him down, he kind of just looked up, like up and to the side, and he like just did the sign of the cross, and then kind of went like that, just sat, leaned back. They lifted the ropes because he was collapsing. He fell onto the, like laid down onto the mat and closed his eyes, and that was the last time that he ever was awake. And then, you know, soon after, it seemed like hours, but the ambulance came, and he had a seizure on the mat when they were holding him. But, you know, looking back a year and a half now, even though he wasn't pronounced dead until October 2nd in the hospital, looking back, I can almost say that it was that moment, you know, like I say, he saw God.
Yeah.
And that's where he went.
Wow.
And his body just stayed with us to save other people's lives.
Yeah, and it definitely did. So he's in the hospital, and from hearing it right, from basically the 28th through the 2nd.
Yes.
And during that time, what's going through your mind through all this? Other than, I'm sure, prayer and trying to...
Yeah. So, I mean, at the time, all the way up to the hospital, I got to the hospital before the ambulance did. and the ambulance pulled in right behind me. And I remember my youngest daughter was already there waiting. I had called her on the way, and Abraham's dad, my ex-husband, he showed up just a few minutes later, and we're sitting in the waiting room. And at this point, I'm still thinking he's okay. It's serious. Something serious is going on, but he's going to be fine. He's going to be fine. Like, I don't think anybody ever believes that their child is going to die. Yeah. And so, we're sitting in the waiting room and we're talking like, oh my gosh, he is going to be like, what happened? We're talking like he's going to wake up and want to know what happened, because this is going to be a crazy story for him to tell his friends, like, And then when the surgeon came out and told us that they removed half of his skull and they didn't think, at that point they were basically telling me, just don't put him on life support. And I was like, no, that's not an option. Yeah. But at that point he was still breathing on his own. But I still remember when he told us that, I was like, no, and that those no's started turning into yelling. And then I was like, oh my gosh, no. And all these things crossed my mind. Like, what do I do? What do I do? Like, I think I remember crying and saying, I need my mommy. Yeah. Like, I don't know. You don't know what to do. I can't remember any thoughts going through my head except for, this cannot be real. How do I go back? How do I turn it around? How do I make it stop? And I had to call my older daughter and tell her what was going on. And, she was just kind of trying to calm me down, like, no, this isn't happening. Don't worry, Mom, everything's fine. He's going to wake up. He's going to be fine. And, and then over the next few days, as they were, he was on a ventilator, and they're saying that he's breathing over the ventilator, but it was very minimum. I was like, well, I'm not taking him off the ventilator. I'm not doing any of these things. You're going to have to go until you guys tell me that he's gone. And they do the brain death test. And so they did the first one, and he failed it. They said there was no activity or whatever. Yeah. And I was like, no, still didn't want to believe it. But at that point, they did it once. They have to, 12 hours later, do the second one. And if he fails the second one, then that's when they pronounce his time of death. So when they did the second one, I mean, the room was full of people. Doctors, nurses, family, friends. And it was rough because taking the ventilator is taking his breath. And, when you hold your breath, you turn red, and that was happening. And I was just like, gosh, and finally I was like, okay, enough, give him the ventilator back. I'll accept what is. But between the two times, I said, okay, he failed the first one. So the chances of him failing the second one are very real now. And I looked at the nurse and I was like, you need to get the organ donation people. I need them to come see me now. And I was sitting there in the family waiting room at the end because, I just needed a moment. And I looked at my dad and I was like, hey, can you call Belinda, which is his cousin. I had seen the week before that they were raising money for Belinda's husband, Raphael, to get on the transplant. To get a transplant. They were raising money for that. He needed a kidney, and I was like, I'm going to donate his organs, and I want to see if we can help Raphael. And then I also said my brother-in-law needed a kidney. And so, I'm on one phone, my dad's on another phone, and I was like, I want to make sure these people are on the transplant list because I want to give them a direct donation. And it was very emotional, but also, at that point I had to maintain, because I'm losing my son over here, but I know what he would want is to help other people, because my son, he loved making like movie plots, he'd be like, could you imagine if this or this happened, and like I'm laying there and whatever, just where he's always the hero. And I loved it, and that was since he was little. So I was like, I need to make sure that he's the hero in his story now. And the rest of it was kind of a blur. I know that I pestered the organ donation people constantly. I wanted to know when you guys were all being notified. I wanted to know when they found recipients. That was what was getting me through it at that point. That was the only thing getting me through it. That was what kept me going around the room, comforting everybody else that was crying. It was, some people might even say that my behavior was weird, but I don't think so, because I could break down and sit there and cry and become a mess and not get anything done, or I could hold it together and do what he wanted me to do, because I felt like he was there telling me, this is what you need to do.
And so kidneys, obviously the heart, lungs, was it eyes too?
No, liver.
Liver.
Yes.
I mean, that's incredible. I'll tell you from my side of the story what happened. It was October 3rd, and I'm, at this point I'd already been told that I'm on the list, and I was like, okay, great, I'm on the list. However, I'm a big guy, just like Abraham was, right? And I'm O positive blood. Thank goodness, so was Abraham.
Yes.
But that's a rare blood type, and we're not small people, so it's like it's got to be a match. They told me, this could be months, that you could be in here, which is, it takes a toll on you. And I'd been in for almost 2 months at this point in the hospital, and I remember I got a call on my phone, and I missed a call. I didn't know who it was. I'm like, I don't want to talk to anybody. But then the phone rings in the room, which it had never rang in the room. I'm like, oh, well, somebody must be trying to get a hold of me. So I grabbed the phone, like, hi, and it's my transplant coordinator, it's Melissa. She said, hey, Josh, how would you like to get a heart tomorrow? And I'm like, what? Yes. I mean, it was. The first part of me was like, this is amazing, what I've been waiting for. And then the other part was like, oh my God, somebody died. And I knew like that had to happen. And I'm like, it's a terrible thing to have to think about and to go through. But that's when she called me, and then I started thinking, I'm like, they said it's something that normally how it works, I guess, is it's like, okay, you're going to get a transplant, it's on its way, and we're going to get you in right now. It's like, oh yeah, we have you scheduled. I'm like, scheduled for 3 o'clock? Okay. But now, and then meeting you and hearing the story, like he was basically being kept alive so that those organs could go.
Yes.
And it's, obviously it changed lives, and he is a superhero. I mean, that's something that you can't, it's a gift that you can never repay. And that's amazing. So the year after, I mean, it was tough. So I'll tell you, everybody kind of the story of me getting the first letter. This is Tuesday, actually I think it was a Thursday. It was before Christmas. It was the 23rd, and I'm in cardiac rehab now, right? I had the transplant. I'm in cardiac rehab, and I'm on the treadmill, and I get a call. But this time it says Melissa. And I'm like, okay. Hey, Melissa, what's going on? She said, hey, I've got a letter from your donor family. Would you like it? I'm like, yes, of course I'd like it. And she's like, okay, well, I'll be here today. So I called my wife, and then we literally went and picked her up, went straight down there, and I read the letter. And when you get that letter, right, they don't just like allow you to read it yourself. Like they're kind of in the room with you when you're like reading through it. I don't know why, but obviously I was in tears, reading this, and like there's the beautiful letter you wrote about him and who he was, and then I started seeing all these like commonalities, right? Like I changed my life from 8th grade to 9th grade, and it was the Rocky movies, and it was literally boxing. I wasn't boxing people necessarily, but I put up a speed bag, I had a heavy bag, I had worked out every day, and I was overweight, and I changed that the same year that he had changed that. It was like, okay. And then my podcast is named One More Round. It's been that way for years, and it was literally after a Rocky quote. So I'm like, and then sunsets, I'm like reading all this stuff. I'm like, oh my gosh, greatest gift to get before, Christmas time. And then I wrote you back in January, and again, I don't know how long it takes. I just knew that yours got to me in about 20-ish days. And I'm like, okay. And then I didn't hear anything. And then you had gotten back to me, and this was right before Thanksgiving of the next year. So talk about like great holiday timing. And then, you said you were open to meeting, and that was just amazing. So going through that first year for you, how was it? And what would you tell somebody that's on your side of the story of having someone that you lost, a son that you love so dearly that has helped so many people? What would you tell them?
I would definitely. I've become a huge advocate for organ donation. So, for somebody on my side who's considering it, I would say do it. Your loved one would love you for it. I believe completely, because the reward of seeing the lives that it touched. I mean, not just you, but your kids, and not just this guy Christopher, but his daughter, and my own family. It really helps in that, destitute time, and for the families that, maybe the person already was an organ donor and they're just going through it. You just have to. It's hard. It's so hard to say. Like, it's so hard to put words to it. But it's like knowing that his life and his death wasn't in vain. Mm-hmm. Seeing the outcome, knowing the outcome, like what I do with the other people, it really changes your perspective on it. I know it took a year for me to write you back after the first letter. And that was because I think when I got your letter, it helped me rest. Mm-hmm. I knew that I wanted to know that the transplants were successful. I wanted to know that the people were okay. I wanted to know that they were alive and healthy. And once I got the letters back from the people that I did, I was like, okay, now I can grieve, and now I can go through what I need to go through. But yeah, I would say, it's so hard. I mean, it's really hard to put words to it, because it is such a, mm-hmm. Like, it's hard to say, I'm happy that that your life is saved. I'm happy that all these people's lives were saved, because I'm so happy. Yeah. But saying that is also saying,
right,
my son's gone. And, I'm like, well, I'm not happy about that. But if I'm not happy about that, then how am I? It's such a conflicting emotion, right. But it's definitely, I know that Abraham that he approves of the decision that I made on his behalf, because I know that he would have made it if he could have himself.
Well, and he's become a part of multiple people's lives that literally it's like, everybody has a story, right? And then you sometimes, you go through your story, you live a life, you pass whenever, but that's kind of that's your story. It's very linear. Mm-hmm. But then there's situations like this where his story his was linear for a minute, and then now like his story carries on. Like I you know, always speak and talk about his name, and I'll always do my absolute best to honor that. And I know that the other recipients feel the same way.
Yeah.
So it's like it's a, you know, it's almost like he's got a story that's spreading way further than a normal individual that's just, you know, kind of linear through life, and that's pretty amazing. So, well, I really appreciate you coming on today, and I number one, I hope the people that are listening to this get to understand the importance of being a donor and how it can impact people's lives, and how even though it's emotional and tough, like it's the greatest gift you can give somebody who might not have a chance otherwise. And then also that although there's nothing easy about it, that you can take a little piece from the fact that you've helped so many people through such a tragic time.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you.
And I know if you watch this and you weren't like at least a little welled up a few times, you know, you need to check yourself, but I'm just kidding. But thank you guys for watching this. Please share it out with somebody who maybe has a story that has a transplant story, or someone that you think would be inspired by this. And we appreciate you guys. We'll see you next time.
See ya.